You're watching Public Comment every Thursdays at 8 a.m. the live stream. Detroit is different and Bridge Detroit. Local politics of Detroit. All right, welcome back. Welcome back to another episode of Public Comment. And we are talking municipal politics of the city of Detroit, January 23rd, 2025. But specifically today, we're talking about the Detroit Land Bank Authority. I know you know about it. It is an entity as signature as Detroit as 2008. I'm Kari Frazier of Detroit is Different. And here with me is Malachi Barrett that writes a notebook for Bridge Detroit every week that we base a lot of this content from Public Comment on. So we do this weekly every Thursday at 8 a.m. Malachi, how you feeling today?
Morning. I'm doing good. It was a really interesting session yesterday, so I'm excited to jump into this. People have been talking about the land bank. I mean, pretty much every day I hear from people who have various concerns about the land bank, and they've been waiting for city council to kind of dig into this contract with the land bank authority. But it didn't really go the way I think a lot of folks thought it would. So
wait, I would say already, because even as you're saying that, I think for a lot of people, they're like, yeah, it did, because basically city council has no power, which goes back to a lot of the structure of our city. This is a highly executive city. This is something to keep in mind as these elections are coming up. And sometimes one of the things that gets under my skin is when people that are running for legislative positions say they can do executive things, and people that are running for executive positions can say they can do legislative things, i.e., let's break that down in city politics. When people that want to be mayor say they can do things that city council can do, like approve budgets, move budgets forward, and basically figure out how that's going to get spent and ordinances. And when people that run for city council, the legislative division, say they can do executive things like hire people, make sure that this gets delegated to this department and that or the other, and how it's delegated, which is executive, that gets under my skin. The Land Bank Authority is very interesting because let's get into the history of this one. The inventory, total properties, 66,000 properties that we're looking at. Residential, about 5,000. This has changed drastically, right? So this has been something over the administration of Mike Duggan that has been one of the biggest changes, one of the biggest impacts that I think has a change on the impact of Detroit moving forward for now and evermore. So you see the numbers there. All of this information is right in the notebook that Malachi has on Bridge Detroit. And we move forward with some different questions about the authority and some of the background. So it was established in 2008. Expanded so much in 2014 to manage foreclosed and abandoned properties. The inventory includes vacant lots, abandoned houses, other structures consolidated from public entities. The programs: auction, own it now, rehabbed and ready, side lot programs, $100 for adjacent. So the historical purpose for the land bank and what it was, those are some deep questions. How does the land bank balance community needs with large scale development? So it starts like this. The Land Bank Authority really goes back to, I think, an elephant in the room of a discussion that has been the discussion Malachi's whole journey here in the city of Detroit with Bridge Detroit, period. And that is the overtaxation of residents. So problem A goes into problem B. Problem A goes into problem B because a lot of the properties on the land bank list are houses that were foreclosed, obviously, right? And you obviously have the challenge of people being overtaxed, overassessed in those taxes. So they lose these homes. These homes then go over to the rolls of the Detroit Land Bank Authority. And 2009, 2010, 11, 12, 13, it was like the wild, wild west of people getting online for auctions saying, hey, I'm going to buy 15 properties for $2 and figure out what I can do with them. As time moved on, other sanctions came in. But at the root of where this challenge really comes from is back to the overtaxation of residents that have been here that have never been compensated. You'll hear this brought up so many times on this program. And really, if you go to any community meeting, you're going to hear this uplifted, because that right there is something that has not been addressed ever from the Duggan administration. And when I say ever, the addressing has come back as from corporate counsel saying that it's illegal to pay people back. So the discussion is always like, okay, if you have an authority of houses and properties, why can't you just give these properties to people that were overassessed in taxes? Good idea. The challenge is a lot of the taxes, a lot of the properties in this row are properties that need a lot of attention, development. You're going to need a lot of money to pour into a lot of the properties that definitely on the list now, but many of the properties that were, I guess, in better shape, quote unquote, were snatched up years ago in a process that still is kind of being looked at again and again. With that, let's just start there. And the Land Bank Authority and the Duggan administration and Detroit City Council, even going back to like what was before Santil Jenkins being council president, and what this challenge of the Land Bank Authority has been one of the biggest elephants in the room of the city of Detroit, and it still looms, because I personally feel like that connects directly to the foreclosure crisis, and the foreclosure crisis because overassessed taxes when we already are taxed more than any other municipality throughout the city, throughout the United States of America. I gave that good preface, and we got more, but Malachi, let's go a little bit in just from the tone of not yesterday, but what if people kind of come to you and shared about the Land Bank Authority?
Yeah, I feel like the biggest criticism that I've heard, excuse me, is just the perception of selectivity, or the land bank being very selective about who can get its inventory. So I've heard, normally it happens when residents are kind of around a development project that's being planned. Folks have, told me that they've tried to buy side lots and vacant lots and even homes from the land bank, and have been told either this property is not available for sale right now, or you don't qualify for X, Y, and Z reason. And then that property later ends up in the hands of an investor, an outside, speculator, a developer who's going to do something that maybe the neighborhood doesn't agree with, or that property owner doesn't agree with. And so it's just generally the feeling that people don't have access to this massive inventory of property. And I don't know how widespread that is. Like, if you were to look at, it's 1 out of 10 people, or 1 out of 100 or something that has this issue, I don't really know, but I hear about it constantly. And yeah, I think it just fuels this perception that the land bank, which has a majority of its directors picked by Mayor Duggan,
Yeah,
is
and let's
operating, under his behalf. That they are basically directing the flow of property into the hands of people that are either working on projects that the mayor agrees with, or are somehow connected to him. That's like the key concern that I hear from people all the time, whether that's completely true or not, right?
so now let's talk a little bit about the structure, and then I want you to talk some of what happened yesterday, then we can go through the slides. But the structure is 5-member body. That 5-member body has 4 members appointed through the executive office, hence the mayor of the city of Detroit, 1 appointed through, I think that's Michigan's housing.
Yeah, MISTA, the Michigan State Housing Development Authority, basically the housing department of the state, right?
Yes. And
'Cause
so that,
this is a state entity as well, which is what's kind of, we'll get into this part of the complication around who gets to say what the land bank does, is that, some of the powers are provided by state law, and Michigan, crafted laws to allow land bank authorities across the state to basically, transfer property that goes through the foreclosure process.
mhm. Now, with that being said, that's what makes that power balance so tough. 4 appointed of 5 people. That's beyond majority rule. You know what I mean? And this further talks about just that balance of power between executive branch and legislative branch throughout the city of Detroit. If you look into the charter, because the executive branch has so much power here, and depending upon the efforts of the executive branch and how things move forward, especially going to yesterday, where a vote was put forth, which really shackled city council to only give a yay or a nay without any room for negotiation, which shocked many of the city council members. So, can you speak a little bit to what happened yesterday?
Yeah. So I think we've mentioned this a couple times. The land bank has a contract with the city called a memorandum of understanding that you went into. It explains the duties of the land bank and how it's, what services it's responsible for delivering to the city. Um, the current agreement, I mean, I guess there really isn't one because it expired in December of 2023. The land bank has been operating without this agreement in place, basically using powers that derives from state law to keep going. So, legally it is able to continue. But this memorandum, is pretty important for setting, what they're responsible for and what the city's responsible for. And since December of 2023, the council has been getting ready to have a conversation about amending that MOU to make changes to various uh, programs in the land bank based on the concerns that they've heard from residents. So Mary Waters, for example, has heard a lot about problems with the buyback program, which basically allows people who are living in houses that become obtained by the land bank, which can happen for a number of different reasons. It lets them buy that house. It gives them the first option to buy that house from the land bank before they sell it to somebody else. Waters basically has found that sometimes people have their homes bought out from under them. They're not aware that they're living in a land bank home. They don't receive proper notification. Again, there's a number of things that can happen. So that's an example of one thing that she would like to address with, changes to the memorandum of understanding. I mean, really throughout all of last year, this was kind of sitting in committees, in one particular committee ran by James Tate. And I would keep checking in on this and every week, every 2 weeks, the agenda item would come back up. So we're going to hang on to this and so that we can have a really full conversation around this because it's a complicated topic. Council usually likes to try to kind of bundle different related agenda items together so they can sit down and say, all right, now we're going to dive into this instead of being, more piecemeal about it. So I kind of expected that conversation was coming. Last week, that committee met again and they were ready to have the conversation. Long awaited. Tate was like, all right, finally, we're going to sit down. We're going to talk about what can we change in this land bank agreement. And they were basically told by the law department and the council's own legislative policy division, which researches different policy. I mean, it's basically like legal counsel for the council, city council, right? Mr. David Whitaker, shout out. And the council was told that they actually don't have any authority to make changes to the agreement because what they had in front of them was a document that had been already negotiated between Duggan's administration and the land bank. And so the council could only vote yes or no on that agreement. They couldn't make changes to it unless they wanted to scrap it and kind of start all over. And council was kind of divided on, do we hang on to this for another year? We're about to pick a new mayor in 2026. Somebody will come into office. Does it make sense to change this now or should we wait?
And also, along with a new executive branch,
right,
a new council as well.
A whole new planning department, potentially a new housing department. I mean, the new mayor will pick different directors of all these government bodies.
It changes the arc of everything. And that kind of leads to couple of these more slides. So 3-year agreement that they have, you uplifted that, cannot be amended. Only a yes, no vote. 4 appointed by the mayor. I talked about that. The other Michigan State Housing Development Authority. Historical agreements established in 2013, amended in 2015, and renewed in 2020. And that obviously in that 3 years means that it was not continued in 2023. Should city council have more authority over the land bank authority? I personally think yes, but back to like, this is a very interesting entity to begin with. I believe that part of this structure definitely should have, similar to other bodies that are connected to the city, some people should be appointed from city council as well. And I think that would be just a natural connection to city council more. And limited oversight and transparency and accountability. So Latisha says, this really puts city council in a position where it feels like we have no say whatsoever. On to community criticisms. You had a quote from Richard Clay. Richard Clay was my high school social studies teacher for what was that? Global issues. Shout out to Mr. Clay. Residents have spoken. The city council needs to make a stand. That was Mr. Clay's stake. You know, critics argue that it prioritizes private investors over local residents. Residents report issues like slow demolition. And then also, you talked about people living in land bank authority property. So, if you don't kind of get what that means that basically, and this happened in my neighborhood, a person's living in a home, paying rent to a property that now has been put on the foreclosure rolls, and now it's in the land bank authority and connected to the land bank authority. Now a new owner steps in. It was a Vice documentary that my cousin and my aunt from Cleveland even sent me, where it's happened where people will live in a home. It'll be in the land bank authority rolls. They'll be paying rent, and then someone will purchase that home. Some of these people were purchasing a home from California or even Tokyo. And now, through property management groups that are more so locally based, they're now paying rent to whoever the new owner is, which definitely is very exploitive of the person that's renting the home without giving that person the option to buy the home. That is what Mary Waters is uplifting, because as much as that was in the Vice documentary, that happens, and I know it's happened in my neighborhood. So some of the community arguments also within what could be restructured are it should be every 2 years, um, better archival of the board meetings, and as I said, council selection of some of this. What role should residents play in shaping this? I don't know. Maybe this needs to go to a full city vote. What does that look like in a full city vote? What would the structure of something like that be in a full city vote? I have no idea, because I'm sure that legal standing also kind of goes into what is chartered through the state of Michigan as well with this. But those are questions to raise. And even amongst council itself, Scott Benson has defended the Land Bank Authority, saying that it has been very effective to get properties to people that are interested in being in these residencies and bringing them up to code. Hence, this is another one of those key stressors that I think glares out and comes out, because really, to get a lot of the Land Bank Authority houses, as it's a couple on my block, up to code, that means you're already a person that has more access to capital. And this isn't like a home equity loan that you're getting. Most of these properties are below the cost where you can get lending from traditional methods. Ain't no FHA loans connected to a lot of these properties, point blank. Even like a home equity loan from a credit union, that's probably not going to happen. You're looking at the type of person that can have some investment of, I would say, safely, as a person that just bought a furnace last week. Oh, man. You're probably looking at maybe needing somewhere between safely, and this is if you can do some of the repairs yourself, 50 to $100,000 to invest in these properties, which is points of stressors that I believe that a lot of the people that lost their homes to foreclosure could not get access to. So I really think that the discussion goes beyond just can people get access to the homes. It really becomes also a discussion of what type of lending could the city set up for people to pay into the homes themselves and pay off what those repairs would look like, as the city does have repair programs that already exist. Like, what partnerships could be made there? There is so much development as we see this going on in certain segments of the city. Like, what relationships kind of bear weight there, as it's completely set up for those that have more access to capital to take advantage of this program, whereas we uplift oftentimes, the average household's making about $35,000 a year in Detroit. So to have more than possibly triple what you make in a year to invest in a home is just something that's outside of the means of the average Detroiter. With that being said, Malachi, I want some of your feedback on how, even if you open up the roles, what would actually be more fair and equitable for Detroiters to really truly get access to these properties. I think without the lending, you're creating an opportunity that I don't know if people could take advantage of.
Yeah, I mean, we've written before about how some of some of the challenges that people run into when they're trying to fix up land bank homes, and I can't recall the name of the specific program that we looked into, but in a lot of cases, the land bank will retain kind of an interest in the ownership of the house until you can prove that you've fixed it up to a sufficient degree. So, there is a potential risk of having your property taken back by the land bank if you don't meet certain deadlines to get your property fixed up. And, the land bank has said that it tries to be flexible with people and tries not to take property back. But I think it was last year they had taken back more property from folks than any other year. So basically, more people were failing to fix up the properties that they had bought from the land bank. And I think that's just clearly a finance problem, right? I mean, that's just a problem of people not having access to capital that they need to fix a roof or a porch and, buy new appliances and all this stuff that goes into repairing these aged and damaged houses. So I do think when it comes to like home rehabilitation, pairing that with some, financial assistance seems pretty essential, especially if we want Detroiters to have access to this property and people who live on that block. Um, when it comes to side lots and neighborhood lots not being sold to folks, I really don't understand what's going on there because people say it's a combination of being misled or not getting correct information from the land bank or interacting with a different person every time they call and that person tells them something different. It just seems like there's a lot of confusion around what is actually up for sale, and there's a process of clearing title and and all this stuff is very complicated.
And
But
which uplifts shout out to the Detroit Black Farmer Land Fund and the work they've done. And the one of the founding members, Tapira Reshton, that is the leader of the Office of Sustainability of the city of Detroit. Some of her first work was just in depth on a lot of people that wanted access to these side lots and all of the hurdles they were going through of what clearing that would be. Um, Especially as so many probably properties are still demolished. So when it comes to the side lot program, and it's a couple people in my neighborhood that do have some questions of what's up to grabs and what's up for grabs, as there are some outside investors that own side lots, even in neighborhoods like mine. So the thought process, first off, is how do these outside investors own so many side lots in communities that are so far away from them? Like, what are you doing in West Virginia owning 5 side lots in the city of Detroit? The thought process always, I think, from an American standard, is like land is always valuable and you want it. The challenge, I believe, becomes what's stewarded in the land, meaning like who's upkeeping the land, what's happening in the land, how can you observe the land. The $100 buyback program is something where the footprint of Detroit is different, is very vast from a lot of those properties that my mom, shout out, rest in peace, Jan Frazier, saw forth and knew the value in. And since then, even other properties, definitely a great connection, and applaud Hope Village Revitalization for having that partnership and saying like, hey, Kari, get at these properties. So thank you for that as well. And my neighbors don't have that same access. Some of that, I believe, is just due to the relationships that I've had and the people that are connected to Detroit is different have. So yeah, for a lot of the side lots, I really don't understand what that's about either, especially with Tepfira being there and knowing in the Office of Sustainability. And I'm sure she's uplifted this. I know there are uh, other things that, definitely lie in the political.
it's hard to make broad statements about what's going on because it's an individual. These are case by case basis, and
Very true.
every time I try to dig into one of these situations with somebody, it's a very unique, or it's just a different situation. So it makes it
Yeah.
a lot more. I wish I could be more firm in saying like this is what's going on, but absent more investigation, it's hard to do that.
Yeah, and also, I mean, just like a lot of properties here, you're a new property homeowner, and
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure cleaning the deed in Detroit, and it's like who's connected to it, how are they connected to it? It's not the easiest thing to do. It's not the easiest thing to do. And where that ownership lies, even with the land bank and what comes back to the land bank. When I think land bank, I'm thinking homes first. Uh, but when it gets into the side lot, like you say, that's a whole other discussion that you're uplifting that I didn't even necessarily have here.
I guess another thing we should probably talk about, I don't know if you got this coming up on the slides, but people are mad about the land bank also not selling certain land, and then that land sitting there and becoming an eyesore, becoming a illegal dumping site, becoming overgrown, and
Yeah,
residents in the
like
neighborhood cleaned it up. So it also is on the other end where people feel like the land bank has not done enough to get this inventory through, and it is a massive amount of land that the land bank has had to turn over, right? um, but people dealing with that. I mean, I live a house across the street from a person who's fixing up a land bank house, and it's really not a big of a deal, but I do know that people on my block have frustrations with how long that's taken, because you've got a house that constantly has stuff being pulled out of it. Whoops, almost dropped my coffee. So yeah, I don't know. That's another thing people complain about, that they're living next to houses that haven't been fixed up, that are sitting in
yeah,
the land bank's inventory, or have been sold to somebody, and that person is not doing anything with the house. So
it's as I said, like last week I literally had to get a furnace for the upstairs flat of my home. And the reason I did that is because years ago, as a younger man in the home, I was like, okay, I can go a couple days, wait till I get the right money. But then the pipes burst, and then pipes bursting leads to mildew, leads to mold, leads to new paint, leads to just so many other changes. Thank God I'm at a position where I can buy a furnace. And then even the lending options on that new furnace was so crazy. It's like, man, oh man, I'd have paid for the $4,200 for the furnace. I'd have been paying basically like 90. I'd have been paying like $9,600 over the span of years, which I'm sure some people have to take advantage of those exploitive things if they don't want those outcomes and circumstances to happen to their homes. And I'm just giving like the guts of a home. That's what I often tell people. Like the guts of a home cost so much. So that's the electrical, that's the plumbing, that is the furnace, that's the duct work. God forbid if you have a boiler system in your home, oh my God, and that goes out, you're easily looking at $15,000. And then the other kicker that I'm thinking may happen here in Detroit is different. Knock on whatever this table's made of a roof, porches, window panes, like all of this stuff. We're talking about like the uh lead lines into what comes with the water line, but just the straight line out from the sewer line of a home. Like all of these challenges that in home ownership are the guts of a home. And clearly, when people aren't as active in a home or don't have the capital to invest in that home, those are the things that go, the guts of a home, before you can get on the aesthetics of a home that make people say, wow, I like living next to this neighbor because I got flowers and the paint on the outside. You got to get the guts of a home ready and set up, especially when most of these are investment based properties, even like securing it as you're working on the home from some of those items you put in a home not getting feet walking away from people observing that you're working on a home. These are realities connected to doing work in the city of Detroit, which I think actually a lot of that stuff is the people that are kind of working on homes that kind of actually end up walking away with stuff. But that's a Kari Frazier thought from living in the neighborhood. Um, this definitely is an eyesore for the person that is looking at just having beauty in their neighborhood aesthetically, or if they're thinking of possibly selling their home themselves. Because, yeah, if a person has a land bank home, that could easily be, and I think the process is like 3 years that you have to work on it, but it could easily take like 5 years of pouring in of what's needed depending upon what's happening. I know someone that bought two land bank homes and it was two trees just growing in the middle of them and the people didn't even know. So like tree removal inside of a home structure is, I don't even know who you call for that.
That's crazy. Yeah, I don't know, man. Call a bunch of beavers to come eat the tree or something. Glad I don't have to deal with that.
Yeah. So with that, with that, like we kind of close out with
Let me just say real quick. So what happens with this? This contract is still, not confirmed. The city council on Tuesday decided to send it back to committee as opposed to voting it up or down. They think that they still have an opportunity to make amendments to it. We're gonna have to see where that goes moving forward, because really this feels like a power balance between the executive branch
and the
city
legislative.
council.
That's
And
what
I don't think this is over. I think there's going to probably be more legal opinions to look at, and there will probably be more frustration delivered toward the land bank throughout all
Yeah.
this. So,
and also in the campaign season, we have 2 city council members that are
right.
jockeying for a position of the executive branch.
And I do
So,
think this has implications for the mayoral
definitely
race. I think people are, I mean, the land bank is highly visible. Can't just say enough, like how much people are paying attention to what's going on there. And it's, land use, neighborhood vitality, all this stuff is connected and will come up in the mayor's race for sure.
Definitely. So this is one of those positions where being a candidate that's running for office, Fred Durrell and Mary Sheffield, speaking to this and how you move plays a role in that. And then also just uplifting the fact that the relationship between Mayor Duggan, also campaigning to be Governor Duggan, and because of that relationship with the Michigan Housing Authority, that is going to be key too. Not saying that all of this is a political play, but we got to be aware of that in the middle of this too. Yeah. So I definitely do believe that the stance could be no. And in that no, what happens in that year, it can still operate, but what happens with that no, if it's not a yes, which clearly I believe you never know with the city council. I can't usually predict like how city council will vote on things. I don't know. I really don't know. With that being said, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Public Comment. I know this is just a deeper dive into the Land Bank Authority, but it can go so much deeper. But I hope that it informed you all. I know just even preparing for the show, it informed me a little bit more. And I'm sure we'll probably end up talking a lot more about this throughout the year. With that, Detroit is different. Malachi, tell the people.
BridgeDetroit.com, that's where we live. That's where we got all the free content that hopefully you've come to know and love. We are a nonprofit newsroom, so we can't do this without you. If you want to support what we're doing, please donate to Detroit is Different or Bridge Detroit. My newsletter is free. It comes out every Wednesday morning with some bonus editions here and there. And it really fuels the work of this show, diving into the weeds of city council. And there's always stuff that we don't talk about here that is included. So if you want a comprehensive look at what your elected officials are doing and the decisions that they're making on your behalf, go check that out. We are also going to be launching very soon a new video show, multimedia journalism project about the 2025 city races, largely focused on the mayoral race, but city council, board of police commissioners, clerk, all these other seats will be up as well. And, it's all going to be part of the conversation voters will be having about the future of the city. That is called Detroit Next. Stephen Henderson and I are going to interview candidates and community figures. So if you'd like to come talk to us, definitely reach out to me. Big thanks to Kari for helping on the production end. First episode looks awesome. It'll be dropping pretty soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's just Bridge Detroit on YouTube to find those.
All right. With that, peace. You're watching Public Comment every Thursdays at 8 a.m. The live stream. Detroit is Different in Bridge Detroit. Local politics of Detroit.